Hello and welcome to this episode of the Veterans History Project, Santa Clarita Valley Edition. The Veterans History Project is an initiative of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The Santa Clarita Valley Edition is spearheaded by the College of the Canyons in association with SCV TV and Vets Back to War Zone. The project relies on volunteers to collect the oral histories of U.S. military veterans and support personnel who served in active war zones. Today is February 8th, 2010. My name is Christine Bitter, and my guest today is Bill Reynolds, a veteran of the Vietnam War from 1967 to 1968. Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
Well, first, I always like to start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about when you were enlisted or drafted and where you were from and your family around that time.
Well, I was drafted from the hometown where I lived in the San Fernando Valley, Reseda.
Okay.
And that was in May of 1966. My friends enlisted in the Marines and encouraged me to go with them to enlist in the Marine Corps, but I had a well-paying job at General Motors and a new car, beautiful girlfriend. I thought, when Uncle Sam needs me, he knows where I am, so I'll just wait and see how things shake out. Mm-hmm. And 6 months later, I got drafted.
Okay. And drafted into what branch of the armed forces?
It was into the United States Army.
Okay.
Like so many others from my area, that at that time the San Fernando Valley was hit pretty hard with the draft, okay. And I actually ended up in a platoon with 4 others from my high school class. So we all knew each other at basic training, and somehow 2 of them ended up being discharged early, and but this other fellow and myself ended up staying in the platoon, and so we were together for quite a long while.
Okay, tell me about your basic training.
Basic training. Well, when I went into the Army, we were first flown to Fort Bliss, Texas. My first airplane ride, and from there it was an induction station where we got our haircuts and our uniforms and fatigues and shots. And from that point, we were flown on a old DC-3 or something prop airplane that scared the living daylights out of me, flying from Texas to near Fort Riley, Kansas, which is where we did our basic training. They were reactivating the 9th Infantry Division at that time for service in Vietnam, and so that's where I went for basic. And it was all intimidating. You know, it was the typical thing you see in the movies where, you get off the bus in the middle of the night and the first sergeant and all the other NCOs are out there yelling at you. You can't move fast enough. They're screaming and hollering at you. And and you're just, nervous wreck. You're trying to do what you're supposed to do, but it's impossible to do anything right. Oh. And so basic training was, for me, it was a challenge. I tried hard to do a good job. I wanted to move up in rank because I didn't really like doing KP duty or cleaning the latrines.
And KP duty is kitchen?
Kitchen police.
Okay.
I wanted to avoid assignments.
Okay.
I preferred to issue assignments.
Okay. Were you rethinking the enlisting part at this point?
No, I knew I was in for 2 years, and I wanted to do my service and then return to my well-paying job. Okay. So, but basic was it was hard, really hard work, and I can always remember that the way they selected the squad leaders for our platoon, or for the whole company for that matter, is the drill sergeant basically yelled at everybody to get in our platoon, get in 6 lines, tallest guy at front, shortest back, and then he came down the line and made each of those guys first in line squad leaders.
Oh, just based on height, huh?
Based on height.
Goodness.
And I was third in my line, and I thought, drats, I missed out. And but pretty soon, as we were doing all of our drills, learning to march and all, the two guys in front of me eventually screwed up, and I was eventually stepped to the front of the line and became the squad leader. And
oh, good for you.
And I didn't want to relinquish it. I really, tried to turn left when we were supposed to.
Do everything right.
Do all of the drills properly and do a good job. So I managed to be a squad leader during basic training and for the time we were in training.
Excellent. What weapons did you train on?
We trained with M14 rifles. We trained with bazookas. We learned how to shoot bazookas, which were really cool to shoot. You could see the round go flying through the air to the target, and they were so slow. Hand grenades. We learned how to throw hand grenades, shoot a .45 pistol, machine guns, the full gamut of weapons that infantry would use, because we were in the infantry.
Well, tell me about your first assignment. How did you get there? Where did you go?
Well, what happened was after our basic training, we went into what was called advanced infantry training.
Oh, okay.
And it was still there at Fort Riley. And because they were rebuilding, reactivating the 9th Infantry Division, which was an old World War II unit, specifically for the Vietnam duty, we did all of our training for 6 months at Fort Riley. We ended up going on bivouacs out in the boonies of Fort Riley. A bivouac, where you went out and did Army drills, learning how to go out on search and destroy missions, and how to assault the enemy, and how to respond to being pinned down and things like that. And you slept out there in tents. You dug foxholes.
Very realistic training.
It was intended to be as realistic as possible. Although in the wintertime at Fort Riley, where it snowed and was freezing cold, it was hardly like the terrain or the climate where we were headed. But they did put us through some what was considered jungle training. And also a prisoner of war camp in case we were ever captured. We went through some pretty rough, harsh treatment during that time. But as
wouldn't happen today, maybe.
I don't know what the standards are today for training troops, but we have an all-volunteer military these days, and I would like to think they were as tough on these guys as they were on us back then.
Well, did you benefit from your training? Did you think that your training was sufficient?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we had great NCOs, non-commissioned officers, who trained us. We learned a lot. And, we didn't really know initially that we were headed to Vietnam. I mean, there were rumors going around. Because this was in early '66, mid '66, and the Vietnam War was just really starting to gear up. But pretty soon we got the idea, and rumors started going around, and then there were newspaper articles that parents would send their kids, and pretty soon the rumor got around, and then they made it clear that we were going to go to Vietnam.
How did you feel when you got that news?
Well, we felt, I was a nervous wreck about, going into a combat situation, and having already learned how to use all the weapons, I knew that this was serious, dead serious. And, but nevertheless, we were doing what we were called to do. Most of us had parents, fathers who had served in World War II. I did. So it was like a duty, and
so you were ready.
Pride.
You felt ready and proud to do.
Yeah. We were ready to go, and I mean, of course, you have your apprehensions whether you're going to make it back or not. but you know, we went and we had a lot of, there was a gung-ho feeling about going, and a lot of camaraderie in our unit that exists to this day, actually.
Wonderful. Tell me a little bit about your first combat experience.
Well, we initially started out at this place called Camp Bearcat, which was sort of near Saigon. And we would go on these patrols, nighttime patrols and daytime patrols around the perimeter of Bearcat. And it was scary out there, you know, in the jungle, hot. And you never really knew if you know, you're going to find who we call Charlie, who was the enemy, the Viet Cong. The first time that the bullets started flying, well, typically, let me back up a bit. You had a lot of gear, and your helmet, you're weighted down with a lot of stuff. And as soon as you take a break, you know, you take your helmet off, and you just hate that helmet. But I'll never forget that when the bullets started flying from the enemy, boy, you love that helmet. I couldn't get the helmet on fast enough, you know, so... you know, it's a nerve-wracking feeling. There were times on patrols where you could just feel the bullets going past you, you know, and it is fear.
So that was your responsibility, to patrol and look for the enemy and engage them.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Our job was to eliminate the enemy.
There are several close calls, it sounds like, for you.
For all of us, I mean, there were guys who would come back from patrol, and you'd have bullet holes in your fatigues and your canteens. It's amazing. The combat is just an absolute random thing. There's no rhyme or reason once it starts. Who gets hit, who doesn't? It just, you know, the bullets are flying, and you don't know what's going to happen next. And it's an interesting thing too. Even though you're, you know, right next to a guy and he's basically seeing everything you're seeing, everyone has a different perspective of, depending on how they feel or what they're actually seeing versus what you might be seeing. And because we all compare stories after, you know, when we have our reunions, and we remember this chopper landing like 50 yards back, and we seeing guys scramble to get on the chopper. It went up, it got hit, and it started bouncing around in the air, and we're all yelling, "Go, go, go!" And then one guy would say, "Well, gosh, don't you remember Ramos falling out of that chopper before it came down?" And I'm going, "No, I don't remember that." But it could have been where I'm going, "Go, go, go!" And I just averted my eyes because I couldn't stand to see it crash. You know, it was when you see your friends, you know, about to die, it's a horrific feeling. You have no control. You know.
Well, tell me about a very memorable day in terms of battle, in terms of combat. Is there one that comes to mind? Maybe there's some day that you can tell me that would share success and failure or of your experience there.
We went on a lot of those kind of patrols that I was just mentioning to you, a lot of small patrols, platoon size. And one time we went out in May, we went out on a company size operation, and we got into our first serious heavy duty combat with a sizable enemy force. The enemy broke off because we were really giving it to them. But we did take some casualties. We lost one dead and a number of other guys wounded. One of them is paralyzed to this day, Carl Courtwright. So that was our first real taste of some serious combat. On May 15th of 1967, we lost a good guy named Don Peterson. And I remember flying back from that patrol. I had developed a cyst on my tailbone, of all things, and I could hardly walk. And I mean, the combat was over. And so my platoon leader sent me back on a chopper, and they put Don Peterson on the floor of the chopper for when we returned to our base camp. And I remember looking down at Don Peterson, who was a tough guy. And I thought, man, if they can get Don Peterson, we're in big trouble here. That was kind of summarizes my feelings from the first serious, interaction there we had, or action with the enemy. That was just the beginning. On June 19th of that year, we had a major battle. It actually lasted all day.
And that one got some press coverage. Am I correct?
It did. The Los Angeles Times reported the following day that the enemy had decimated a U.S. Army unit.
Why don't you tell us what happened that day?
Well, again, we were on this was a battalion-size search and patrol mission, and we were out there to find the enemy, and the intelligence had said the enemy was at a certain location. So we went to that location, and it was the wrong location. So they've got new intelligence, and so they moved us. And so when they set us down again, we set out across the rice paddies. I was point man for Charlie Company that day.
What does that mean?
I was a front guy.
Okay.
I was, it's like you're in a formation, like a pyramid sort of formation, a big V formation. Everybody spread out. And so I was the furthest guy out there, and which you really have to be alert when you're the point man. You have to be alert at all times.
Absolutely.
But we were out there. It was about mid-morning on that day, and all of a sudden the bullets started flying. And what we discovered was that the enemy that we were told were there, we had found them.
Okay.
And they were dug in bunkers along this little stream, and the stream was like 25 feet across from where we were.
Okay. When
the bullets started flying, as soon as I heard the first shot, I hit the ground. And I realized, wow, I'm out here exposed, So I remembered a rice paddy dike, so I jumped up and ran back. And as I was running back, I could see everyone in our company scrambling to this big berm that was in parallel to the stream, which was like 20, 25 feet from the Viet Cong that were dug in. Mm-hmm. And we hunkered down along that berm, which didn't give us a lot of cover, but it was cover, and we were firing back. I had a grenade launcher, and I was firing my grenade launcher, and a Viet Cong bullet blasted right through the barrel of that grenade launcher as I was reloading, and it's like, I remember going, it scared me, and my platoon leader was laying there, Jack Benedict. He says, "Hey, Reynolds, are you hurt?" And I was going, "I don't know." And we started laughing. It was the adrenaline that was going. But meanwhile, there was a sniper back there, and he was hitting our guys. We were getting hit left and right. Guys all up and down the line were getting wounded. I'll come back to that. But little did we know, 800 meters west of us was Alpha Company, part of our battalion, and they walked right into an ambush over there. Okay. And all in all, we ended up losing 48 guys that day. Our medic. I didn't want to do this.
Your medic was a little overwhelmed with all of
Well, Bill Geyer was his name. Thank you. He was right there amongst us, and he was bandaging everybody, and he was hit under the arm, and so it left to me to try to, bandage him and
get him going again.
And he talked to me and talked me through bandaging him, of all things. And Benedict was giving me instructions on how to bandage him, but he laid there and died. Okay. That was something that I've lived with, all of these times. I'll never forget that guy and his bravery. We were hunkered down there all day, and we had choppers coming in, firing on the other side. We had artillery, we had jets, and we were just really pounding the enemy. And at one point where we were getting the best of them, we pulled back. And our company commander had us pull back to the boats, and we were told we're assaulting the other side of the river. And after everything that had already gone on, we had choppers shot down. I saw guys load up in a helicopter, and it was shot down. And it was, I'm telling you, it was like, something you'd see in a movie. It was loud, it was scary,
chaotic.
And it was brutal. These helicopter medevac guys, brave. They'd come right in under fire and pick up our guys, and some of them got shot down. We had to assault the other side of the river, and I remember going across on the boat with all my buddies who were left, who weren't wounded and who weren't dead, and I thought, this is it. This will be my last day. But it wasn't, obviously. I chugged across, down this rice paddy dike after we got across the river, and I had my M16, and it was jamming on me. It was somebody else's M16 because my previous one had gotten hit. And I remember seeing a Viet Cong there standing off, and it was strange to me. This guy is just standing out there like 100 yards away, just observing the battleground, and I thought, this guy must be a forward observer for the Viet Cong, because mortars were dropping in.
Okay.
So he was a forward observer directing a Viet Cong mortar group, obviously, the mortar team. And pretty soon a mortar landed near me, and I was hit with shrapnel in my hand.
Okay.
And so it's probably the lightest wound of the day. I mean, considering everything that happened, I jumped up and I charged back down the rice paddy dike, headed to get it cared for. And my rifle wasn't worth a darn at all. It was jamming up on me. I was having to eject each spent shell with my fingernails. So I was mad, and then when I got hit, I was even more mad. And I plopped down next to the soldier, and I was cursing a blue streak. And he turned to me, and he was our battalion chaplain. He had his cross on his helmet, and I went, "Oh man!" It's like error. And he says, "Go down to the boat, son." And I went down to the boats there at the river's edge, and I think it was a Navy corpsman was there to assist me, and he immediately gave me a shot of morphine right into my wound, which I thought I was going to pass out with that. But they took us several of us wounded down the river and dropped us off and said, "Wait here, a helicopter will come for you." And then the boat pulled away, and there we are, out in the middle of nowhere, 5 of us.
Defenseless.
And defenseless. And we're saying, gee whiz, I hope the chopper finds us. And because you could hear the firing of the battle was still going, it was kind of calmed down. It was almost over. And pretty soon here come a chopper, picked us up, took us to a hospital near Saigon, I think some place called Long Ben Hospital. And it was just like in that TV show MASH, where the nurses come out and the doctors come out to help the wounded, and they made us all get on the gurneys, and they wheeled us into the hospital. Even though mine was a hand wound, they did the same for everybody. And I said to the nurse, "Put me to sleep." And they gave me some medication, and the next day I woke up, and sitting on my little nightstand there was my Purple Heart. But
wonderful. When did you hear that the battle was a success for your battalion?
Well, within a couple of days, we were back to the ship. We were living on barracks ship at the time, and as soon as we got back, we found out, how many guys had been lost, and the devastation that we had done to the enemy, because we had literally wiped them out.
Who was the witness for your Purple Heart medal? I mean, how did that happen?
I have no idea. I just woke up and there it was. I mean,
it was for helping the medic correct? Or what
No,
was
it was when you're in combat, and if you're in the infantry, almost you're probably going to get hit if you're in the infantry. You're darn lucky if you're not wounded, at least if you're in a combat zone. If you get a Purple Heart if you are inflicted by enemy fire.
Tell me a little bit about this plaque here.
This plaque was made by one of our guys from the 3rd Platoon, a fellow by the name of Jace Johnston. Pretty successful guy in the Phoenix area. And he just felt like he wanted to do something nice for everybody, because we have our reunions every 2 years, our Charlie Company reunions. And Jace has made it a habit to have these made up for all of those who attend our reunions. And it's a list of all the guys that we lost in Charlie Company that year that we were there. It's quite a list. We lost, you can see the June 19th date, we lost a lot of guys on that one day. But anyway, all of us have this plaque that regularly attend our reunions, and I have it in my home office. It's next to my doorway, and I look at it.
It's very nice.
Every day.
It's very nice. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. You went back to the war zone there that you were at in 2007, correct?
Yeah, like I said, we have our Army reunions every 2 years, and actually for the last several years, my wife and I have been facilitating those. Every time we have an Army reunion, there's a discussion about, well, where should we have the next reunion? And at one point there, several years ago, one of the guys was saying, well, we need to go back to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And I really couldn't get a sense of whether there was that much of a commitment from enough guys, because it's considerable expense. Mm-hmm. So this one year at our 2006 reunion, I made a commitment. I said, you know, I'm going. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go. And
how many went with you?
And if anyone wants to go, let me know. Well, it turned out there were 17.
Oh, wow.
But there was a Navy guy who was part of that June 19th battle. The mission for this return trip was to visit the June 19th battle site and also retrace our footsteps in the Mekong Delta.
Well, thank you so much, Bill, for being with us today and sharing your stories. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Okay. And thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more Santa Clarita episodes of the Veterans History Project, log on to scvtv.com. I'm Christine Bitter, and we'll see you next time.